put it up and wait for people to come in. Maybe they try to log in, maybe they try SQL injection, maybe they try cross-site scripting, maybe a remote file injection, whatever, right? But we record all of the activities so that we can learn what is going on and what is happening and how do they do it. So, of course, the HoneyPot is not our production system. So my MacBook cannot be a HoneyPot because that's my work notebook, right? It will not be smart to test on that production system, right? But I can set up a host with nothing inside it, but I will configure the host to be able to look like a real system, right? Either it's a real system, a physical and real system, or it could emulate a real system so that it will look real when people try to connect to it. So if somebody tries to SSH to it, they will get an SSH login, right? If people try to ping it, they will get a ping response. The machine is alive, right? I can make it in such a way that the attacker will believe that this is real, right? And want to do some more things on it. Okay, so any activity coming to a HoneyPot, right? So because this has no production value, and sometimes I don't even announce it. I put it up on the internet, I give it an IP address, either inside my network or on the internet. I don't announce, I just leave it there. So anything that comes to it must be suspicious because nobody is supposed to come to this system, right? So we put it up in the open and see what comes to it. So anything that comes to it is definitely suspicious. So this is really useful because sometimes in a real production system, right, in a production system, you get a lot of real traffic and you get a lot of malicious traffic and they are mixed, right? With the HoneyPot, you only get the potentially malicious traffic, right? So it's good for the security analysts because now we can be more focused, right? So what is a HoneyNet then? A HoneyNet is just a network of many honeypots, right? So I run many honeypots and I call them my HoneyNets. Right? Simple idea. So why do people do this? Like I said earlier, people do this to gather information, right? To use it as an early warning system. So suddenly I get a lot of scans on port 443. Maybe there's a vulnerability related to OpenSSL, right? Suddenly I get a lot of probes for port 23. Maybe people are really interested to telnet in and do some malicious activities. So this is the value of the honeypots. There are different kinds of honeypot systems, right? So there are many ways to do this. One is called low or medium interaction honeypots. So low, medium interaction honeypots are not real systems. They are emulation, right? We emulate an SSH login, for instance. We emulate a web server, or we emulate a web application, right? So we try to have some interaction with the attacker, but it is not a real system, right? So low interaction honeypots, or low to medium interaction honeypots, are very easy to deploy. You can even write a simple script for it. It has very low risk, right? But it is as good as you make it, which means that maybe a real attacker will realize that you're just playing with him, right? He knows that, oh, this is not a real system, right? Try to issue some commands, he will not get a result, for instance, right? So immediately he knows that this is a trap. He goes away, he or she, right? So a high interaction honeypot is actually a real system, right? So I set up a server and I installed Windows XP on it. I put it out in the open, right? So people come in, hack into it, and do all kinds of things in it. So I get real interaction with the attacker, right? They are live on my system and getting actual response from their activities on my machine, right? However, this kind of systems is really good, but it's also highly risky, right? And there's a lot of maintenance involved as well, right? So if I get an attacker, he does everything on the system. I extract the information, I do analysis on it, but I need to clean the machine up again, right? Or reformat the system from scratch before I put it out in the open again, right? So a lot of work. With emulation, with low and medium interaction honeypots, I don't have to do much work, right? Everything is actually just a bunch of log files. It's not even a real system. So those are the two concepts, right? So after this, if you read up on honeypots, you'll find this. High interaction, medium interaction, low interaction honeypots, right? Okay, so let's go into another angle. So we said one is low interaction, high interaction, but we can also think of it as server-based, which means that it's a service listening for incoming connection, right? So I set up a script that listens on port 80 so that I will attract people who are scanning for websites, right? So a server listens passively, right? And anything that comes to it is, is a potential thing that I want to have a look at. Another idea of running a honeypot is that instead of waiting, we go out, right? So some people also develop client-based honeypots. What they do is they write a client, like a browser, that will go and surf websites and look for malicious contents, right? And the client pretends to be maybe an IE or a Safari browser or Opera or Firefox, because sometimes the attacker, they put malicious scripts on websites and they behave differently according to the type of browser that you are using, right? So this is also another concept. So you can think also from the perspective of, do you want to run a service, which is probably easier, right? I just set up a service, put it up on the internet, or I could, pretend to be a client and try to find services, right? So one is incoming, the other one is outgoing, right? So far so good. So why do you want to do a honeypot? Because I think there's a lot of benefit that comes to it. When I was studying computer security, or when I'm learning computer security, what is missing is real data, right? I can read a book, I can watch a video on YouTube, I can attend a conference, I can listen to people talking about security, but I don't have anything that I can play with, right? And I don't want to hack into people's system. That's wrong, right? Is that wrong or right? So I see some hesitation here, right? But if you run a honeypot, you get a lot of data from your analysis. And it's very, very interesting. You can share this information with one another, right? Other than, of course, learning it on your own. So you collect PCAPs, like network traffic, you have some logs, you have some information where attacks are coming from, right? And again, the benefits of honeypots here is that very low false positive, because it's a system that has nothing, and therefore it should not get anything, right? So anything that comes to it is good stuff. It may potentially catch new attacks, right? Maybe there's a new vulnerability and people are actively scanning, for certain things on the internet. You may catch that, right? Very minimal hardware, right? You don't have to have a real, hardware, physical these days to do it. You can run some virtual machine. It's good enough, and you get alerts as well. The con is, of course, you have to manage an extra system. This is especially from the perspective of a security administrator, right? So you have your firewall, you have the IDS, you want to deploy honeypots, maybe in extra work. But definitely, you have extra data. Of course, attackers have the ability to detect honeypots these days. They can fingerprint it, right? So sometimes, our system is not so real, they know, at least for the good ones. Some honeypots have a risk of actual compromise, which means that people actually break into them and then break out of the virtual machine into the real system and get into your network, right? So if you don't configure it properly, there is that risk as well. So minimize your risk when you are deploying honeypots. In some places, a honeypot is seen as a trap, right? So which means that there could be some legal issues, right? So imagine this, I have a house and I purposely leave the door open, right? Of course, people who are passing by will be very interested to come into my house because I leave my door open, I put a camera, right? So I'm actually trying to trap him. And in some countries, this is not legal. You cannot do that. You cannot tempt people to steal and then catch them, right? So there is some legal concerns about that as well. False negatives, of course, it could be just noise on the internet. There's a lot of misconfigured servers, right? It could be operationally intensive, lots of work to maintain this, right? But it's fun. So let's go on the implementation. I'll give you some examples as well. So if we recap, honeypots are computer resources that are to be probed and attacked, right? So a honeypot attracts all kinds of interesting things on the network. And why would you want to do this? I think I've given you a lot of reasons already, right? So traffic that comes to the honeypot, that's useful things, right? That's for your analysis or whatever. If you deploy a honeypot inside your organization, right? So many people here, you work in an organization and you think that, okay, maybe my network is safe. Or maybe it's not, I don't know. I already have a firewall, I already have IDS, I already have other protection in my network. What else could go wrong, right? So how do you then test your curiosity, right? Well, you put up a honeypot in your network to see if anybody in the network is scanning your machine, right? Maybe there is a malicious software in the network, right? A malicious system that is actively scanning other people's computer in your own network. If you deploy a honeypot, it will probably pick it up, right? An attack from an internal machine or somebody inside the organization who's trying to break into a computer or a system inside the organization. You can do that. If you're interested to learn about attacks in the wild, in the open, and you want real data, then you can just put a honeypot on the internet, put it in your DMZ, for instance, right? Get a hosting space somewhere, get an IP address, set up a honeypot, and let it run, right? And see what you capture. So you can learn about context of attacks, you can learn about attack sources, right? You can learn about vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited, for instance. And with all this information, not only as a security researcher, you have a lot of data to play with, but you have also capabilities and ability now to share information with another security researcher, right? Because let's say if you have a honeypot running in Cambodia, maybe the things that you see are only unique in Cambodia, right? Not in other places. So you can tell me and say, hey, I got this thing. Maybe you want to have a look at it. And by the way, what do you have? Can you share with me, right? So it's much easier to share information when you have something to share back, right? So you don't just ask for information. You are also ready to give back something for other people to learn as well, right? And that's why we have a big community of honeypots and HoneyNet practitioners with the HoneyNet project. Because people run different kinds of things. Some people are interested to detect malware. Some people are interested to study web attacks. Some people are just interested to see, what is out there. And people share a lot of things together. Okay, now let me give you some ideas. So now we have colors so that people stay awake. Some people are falling asleep. So why honeypots is very interesting? Because of the following reasons, right? Many of the attacks on the internet happens like this. So let's say I have a target machine, that's my honeypot, right? Somebody is interested to break into my system. That's host 1, right? That's host 1. So he will send some packets, right? I don't know, nmap, ping, whatever, metasploit. But the point is that traffic will come to me, I will get it, yes? And let's say I have a vulnerability. Attacker, host 1, had successfully got into my system, right? And normally, or sometimes, the attacker wants me to connect back to him, right? So maybe a reverse shell, for instance. So I go back to him, right? So we have lots of traffic. Sometimes, right, the attacker, host 1, attacked me using some exploit. He or she gets in, but that's half of the story. And then it will instruct me to pull a file from another host, okay, that contains the payload, right? So imagine I'm a researcher. I look at the scenario. What have I accomplished here? Right? I have identified 2 malicious hosts. One is one that is attacking, and it could be that maybe this machine has been compromised already. It has a malware, right? Maybe it's not there's no hacker behind that machine. It's a machine that has been broken into using some malware, and the malware is actively scanning the internet looking for a vulnerable machine. If it finds one, try to exploit it, right? Once managed to get in, it pulls a payload from another machine, right? So I have context, I have a big picture now. Oh, these are two systems involved in attacking me. Maybe they belong to the same malware family, right? Maybe there is a group behind this type of attack, right? So that's one interesting idea that can come out from your honeypots, right? You can learn this thing, or you can visualize this. So, as I said earlier, so hosts that are trying to connect to you, they can do many things, right? They can try to log in, right? They can upload some scripts, some files, right? You can get packets, net flows, source of attack that you can share with other people, right? Maybe the machine, the IP address that is trying to attack you is so well known, right, that it's been trying to attack other systems as well. So what can we do? We can blacklist these IP addresses, right? So firewalls will not see it, right? We'll just drop the connection if it tries to make an attempt, for instance. The relationship with other systems, right? So sometimes it is not just one machine, it's maybe multiple machines involved in an attack, right? So you want to know this because you want to be able to tell cancer that, hey, these are 5 machines from Cambodia that I saw in my honeypots, right? And I don't think, they're not malicious because otherwise they will not be doing it. They will not be coming to my honeypots, right? So now they have information. They can go to the owners of the system to ask them to clean it up, for instance, right? Sometimes when the attacker comes into your system, they execute some commands. So you are able to know like what commands they run and what tools they use and so on. Okay, so that was the server-based honeypots. This is now different.